You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan White.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. If you are a subscriber to the show, take 5, make yourself a cup of coffee. I'd like to have a word in private with those of you who do not subscribe yet. Listen, it's easy. All you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or do as Jason's dad did, go to Radio Public. And you can be one of the listeners who get notified immediately when shows are there. Anyway, you might have heard we recently celebrated our 100th episode. And to begin our 3rd year on the air, we are going to be announcing some really cool sweepstake giveaways, including cameras and lenses and photo gears. Today, we're having a different kind of a podcast. We're having a Schmooze cast. This is going to be our 2nd year-end finale roundup. And in this show, it's just going to be Jason, John, and myself. We're going to be talking about some of the favorite parts of the past year. We've had some pretty incredible shows here.
It's a clip show.
It's a clip show, yes. We started going over all the shows we've had, and we're kind of astonished about the variety of guests and topics we've had here. And we put together our little 10 favorite lists here, and there was some overlap and some underlap. And we're just going to go around the table here and talk about some of our favorite parts. And since I'm already talking, I'll start. I would say that one of the most interesting shows we had here, amongst a lot of interesting shows, had to be with Lynn Goldsmith. And I knew a bit about her before we had her on as a guest, and I started to learn more and more and more. And I'm just kind of blown away of what this woman has accomplished in her many years in the business. She's a photographer. She's a producer. She's written music. She's done movies. A lot of conceptual stuff.
This is an episode we had in November recently.
Yeah, not too long ago.
She's famous for her rock and roll photography.
Shout out to Will Powers.
Yes. She was actually here to plug her book about Kiss. But the topics we covered went so far beyond that. She talks about her interactions with Frank Zappa, who she was very close with, and how she got him to change the name of one of his best LPs, Shake Your Booty. He had a whole different concept. She walked in the door to take pictures and changed the whole album concept, which is kind of funny. And also dealing with difficult celebrities. Like, there's nothing, if you're a working photographer and you show up to say a portrait, and the person who you're supposed to be photographing wants no part of you or taking, and that could be rough. She deals with that, and she's had some real interesting interactions. Let's play the clip.
So Alan mentioned over 100 album covers. Is there one or two that stand out as favorites?
Yes.
As favorites?
Yeah, and they're usually the ones that I handed in the package. In other words, where I worked with the artist and then I put the type on and then we just delivered it. That's what I did with Grand Funk.
Okay.
But when you took jobs from labels, there was an art director, and normally, so the opportunities that I had to do that was Patti Smith Easter, because Patti had control over what her album cover looked like. So we picked it out. She selected the typeface and the color, so it's meaningful to me because we did it together.
Right.
And the same thing for Carly Simon and Torch. And then Frank Zappa's Shake Your Booty would be my number one because Frank came to me. The album was called something else. I don't remember what it was, but the album was a takeoff on disco music. And I listened to it, and there's this song, I'm in you, you're in me. And it was a Peter Frampton kind of spoof. And I always felt that Frank Zappa was a very handsome man, and he, in his photographs, was far more comfortable showing his sense of humor, and always had, since the days of the Mothers of Invention. What Frank wasn't comfortable showing was how handsome, that's what I felt.
Right.
I'm not saying he did, but that's how I perceived it. So I listened to the record, and Frank came with his props and everything and was directing me in terms of what he wanted for the album cover, red background. And I just thought it was, Frank's a genius, but it was really stupid. But I did exactly what he wanted. And then when I completed it and he was happy, I said, okay, so now I have an idea and I'd like you to do this. And I pulled out, Patty Smith had given me, I forget the what you call the scarf, but there's a name for that kind of scarf, and the piece that goes around that's worn by sheikhs in the Arab countries, and she'd given that to me as a gift, and I thought, when I listened to the record, I thought, he's got to change the title of this to "Shake Your Booty," and I'll photograph him as a sheikh, right? So I told him my idea, and he looked at the scarf and he said, "I'm not putting that schmata on my head." See, that's why I like Italians. They know Yiddish.
That's right.
And I did. This is a moment in response to your question about being a woman and how it works or doesn't work for you. I think I did at that moment what no male photographer would do. I burst into tears. That I knew that would clinch it. So he went, okay. And he put it on and I did the pictures. And then when I showed them to him, he said, "You were right. And we're changing the name of the record." And he wrote, and he did the typeface, "Shake Your Booty."
Great.
I think that we were talking about that the other day, that album cover, and that photo is legendary.
Yeah, that's my very favorite for that reason.
Can I throw out a couple other ones just so we can maybe
sure.
some rock and roll stuff?
Sure.
Just a few that I looked at from going through, your website and whatnot. The Roger Daltrey coming out of the water. Is there any?
Well, that comes from a nightmare. That also in my book, Rock and Roll Stories, I have a chapter called Photo Nightmares.
Okay.
Not necessarily that, Roger Daltrey was a photo nightmare. It was an assignment from Rolling Stone for a cover, and I went out there. Now, one would think that if you're going to shoot a cover for Rolling Stone, artists would be very receptive. He was staying in Connecticut in a place on water. And it was around sunset time when I arrived. And I knocked on the door, and he said, he came to the door, and he said, "I don't really feel like doing this." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll just sit here until you do. I'll be sitting right here on your porch." And so he looked at me, and he went back in the house, and then he came out, and he started walking towards the water. So I had an assistant, and I said, "Bring me Mamma Mia." And I followed him into the water. He just kept walking. And at a point where it was up to like my neck maybe, and I'm holding my camera up, not quite my neck, below that. He's shorter than me, so it was deeper and he was going under, and the sun was setting, and I said, "Please turn around." And he did, and that was the shot right before he went under the water.
Wow, that's interesting. I would have thought that was a much more organized shot somehow.
No, you have to be, as I say, you plan. I brought a gray backdrop, but the fact that he has blue eyes that match the water, that's not Photoshop time.
Yeah. No,
and the color of the water, the time of day, I do believe I have a lucky star over my head. So sometimes you work hard and good fortune is there for you when you need it.
That clip was actually better than I remember it being. It's about persistence, and it's about making sure you get the shot, and she is the person who's in charge and not the celebrity, which I really thought was fascinating.
And it's amazing because it looks like such a composed, planned picture.
Yeah, she had no idea. This was just moment by moment.
Well, also the Miles Davis story is worth a listen to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was chilling, actually, especially the way she described it.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next one up was with photographer Richard Drew, and it was the episode on Falling Man, the photograph that appeared all over the world and then was quickly removed from publication
From
about
9/11.
9/11 of an still unknown person falling from the tower. And it was, first of all, it was a riveting episode. The picture itself we could spend days talking about it. I know I actually had my copy of the New York Times that came out the following day, where I first saw that photograph on page 7 or 8. And we had an interesting exchange on that too. Maybe we'll play a clip of that one.
I said, Mike, look at this. And he said, okay, that's it. And we both saw the symmetry of the picture, and but yet the quietness of it. It wasn't a building collapse. It wasn't a fire. There was nobody maimed. It was just
Zero gore.
Zero, nothing. It's not, if you look at the pictures that have been accepted, news pictures. I can take you back to Vietnam. Nick Utt's picture of the napalm girl running down the road.
Eddie Adams with
Eddie Adams, exactly. Picture of the shooting the Vietnamese in the head. The
and you
police
could
chief.
just stare at those, knowing it's so obvious what the horror is, what's going on there. Yeah,
But
your
see-
picture people get blown away by.
But those happened not on our soil. But yet John Philo's picture from Kent State of the after the victim, the student was shot by the National
Guard,
Guardsmen. That picture has been accepted, and these are 3 violent pictures, and they all show some agony and everything. But yet my picture is a very quiet photo. There's no blood, there's no guts, there's no gore, and he's not hitting the ground. And yet it's caused quite a controversy, and people are shied away from it. I think because they can identify with that photo. Because what would they do in that circumstance? I mean, if you have smoke, you can't breathe. In some of the other pictures I have from that day, there's I have pictures of people falling, and yet on the outside of the building, there's an image of a man holding on to the outside of the building. So it's who knows if that man holding on the outside of the building, if he ever got back in, or he was also one of the people who fell from the building. We still don't know if they refer to as jumpers. We don't know they were jumpers.
Well, that's another thing. The documentary Falling Man, I watched it way back when it came out, and we watched it again this week just to freshen up. And one of the things that kind of strikes me is that the coroner's office refuses to call them jumpers. They were forced out, they were blown out, but they will not say that these people had to make a conscious decision of how they were going to die. But
I'm going to jump back a little bit to when you were in the editing room. Was it an immediate, there was a no-brainer that this was the photo?
Absolutely. It's just the picture, it just was there. It had the symmetry.
it's a stunning photograph. Yeah. You know, on that same topic now, we have the newspaper. I have the New York Times right here. This is the paper I picked up that morning from my doorstep. Now the cover of it is pretty darn dramatic. It's the South Tower after the second plane getting hit, and the ball of fire, and you can see black smoke against a gorgeous blue sky. Your picture's on page 7.
In black and white.
In black and okay, that's right. It was color up front. That's right.
That's right. I think it's in black and white. And it's also, I don't have a name credit on that picture either.
Well, we're going to straighten all that out.
No. Somebody very close to me already straightened that out with the New York Times.
It is in color.
It is in color.
It is in
I take
color.
it back. Sorry.
But it was pushed again, page 7, and you recognize it as being a very dramatic photo. Were they already feeling it in their gut that this might be too much, and that's why they buried it back here?
Maybe they thought so, but the Allentown Call, the morning call, put it on their whole back page.
Yes.
And the Staten Island Advance also.
There was a quote that I read about the image, and maybe in one way to look at why people retreated from the image, because it feels like you're looking at a private moment. You know, there's this sense that
I've invaded someone's space.
Well, yeah, or we as the viewer are invading someone's space, someone's private, ultimate decision. I think there's some legitimacy to that.
But we don't know that, do we?
No, we don't. No. I mean,
we don't know if it was his decision or it was.
Yeah.
I mean,
who knows?
look, the truth of the matter is, what's the difference between photographing falling men and photographing a homeless person sitting on the street?
You know, it's interesting. We don't use many pictures of homeless people because you can't identify them as homeless. We don't know that. Do you know he's homeless? Because he's sitting on the street.
Did you know that falling man jumped?
No, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. But he's falling.
He's falling, and the other person is living on the street, at least at the moment.
Well,
maybe not. Okay.
this is a big open discussion here.
Okay, yes.
Well, I think that many people have talked, and certainly Janette in his article, is that leaving the person unknown is more important than finding out who the person is.
I agree 100%. I really do.
And then it's become this symbol for everybody that's been lost.
It becomes a shared experience. Another show was the Irving Penn show that we went to at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the show was amazing to go through. The three of us went together and we just sort of took it all in.
Unbelievable.
And we were not alone there. And then we had a really good show about it. And I think we covered a lot of different interesting topics about photography and technique. And
I put that on my list too. And the reason, because we incorporated other people from our department and we just let people talk, you know.
Yeah.
And none of us are art historians or really experts, but we all brought different opinions. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I was having a conversation with a young photographer the other day, and we were talking about Irving Penn because she happens to love his work, and I mentioned the show. She's down in Atlanta, and I talked about the fact that he would revisit negatives every 10, 20 years because he was constantly evolving his techniques, and he'd go back and revisit stuff. And I thought that was one of the best parts in the show was seeing the same image reprinted and reimagined different ways. And I didn't know about that. That's something I didn't know. A few other shows, Underwater Fine Art Photography with Henki Concharo and Christian Vizl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So.
That was terrific. I'm used to just seeing beautiful, colorful pictures of clownfish and sharks, okay? This was some dynamic black and white imagery, and it gave me a whole new perspective on not only underwater photography, but fine art photography, which is kind of a nice combination. Thomas Roma. We went to his studio in Brooklyn. Where do you start?
Thomas and Giancarlo, his son.
Yes, that was an amazing day.
Amazing.
One thing that comes out in my head was just him talking about sitting in that part of Prospect Park, photographing people. You sit there with his camera on a tripod, and he builds his own cameras. Come on. How many people in the audience, how many of you listeners build your own cameras?
Yeah.
His stories and his way of working and his whole sensibility, he's very unique.
His camera shop that he builds the cameras in was crazy.
Everything is, yes.
And I think Thomas was really one of those kind of Renaissance men, I feel like, because, I mean, he has this like crazy technical know-how that he could build cameras. But his style of photography is so emotional.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know?
All right. Other shows that came to mind. I love the one we did with Bellamy Hunt, Japan Camera Hunter. I mean, that was just Geek City for me.
Yeah, you were on fire that day.
Yeah, I know. You guys just, I wasn't even in the studio anymore. It was just me and him just yapping the most money.
That was a really good gear episode, though.
Yes.
I mean, that's not your mama's gear episode. You know?
Nope. He's a lot of fun. I mean, one of the things a lot of things I remember, but there was one line he came up with that just cracked me up. We were talking about eBay and descriptions of gear, and he said, minty, what does that mean? It was packed away with a can of Tic Tacs. I mean, I just fell over on that one, and that's dead on. And he's a brilliant guy, wonderful at marketing. He's a master at what he does. I really have a lot of respect for the man.
Yeah, he's done great.
Let's listen to that clip.
I'm still waiting to find the German version.
And where does your products blend with the auction and the collectible world? Is it all part of the same thing, or is there every now and again you'll get a camera and you go, this is not really for just a resale. It's really something that should be auctioned out of
I mean,
Sotheby's or something like that.
Yeah, I have items that have been so rare that the only possibility is either to go to auction or to go to a private collector. I don't deal with auctions generally, so and I have a list of private collectors who are very serious about what they want. So if I find something that is, extraordinarily rare, I'll just drop them a line and say, "Hey, I've got this.
And
Get your bank book ready."
On the flip side, have you ever been fooled? Have you ever come across a camera that was presented as something else that wasn't what it was?
Yes. I mean, fooled, no. I mean, I've
or you found a knockoff. And
I've found plenty of knockoffs. I nearly got fooled once. I was sold what we were led to understand was I think it was the 70th or 73rd Nikon F ever made. And everything looked legit until you got up very close and actually took the top cover off and then went, hold on a minute, this doesn't add up. This doesn't compute. And once we'd already paid for it, and once we got the top plate off, we were like, no, this isn't what it claims to be. But this is Japan. I took it back to the shop and said, no, this isn't what it is. And they said, oh, very sorry, here you go, here's your money back, done. It was not
What made you
an issue.
actually take the top plate off?
But with a camera like that, you have to verify what it is.
And what kind of things are you looking for?
You're looking for period correct parts internally as well as externally. Everything's got to match.
Okay. Because I have two 1959Fs from the first 6400, and they do have funny little things about them.
The first 200 have really big differences.
They're cloth shutters, I believe.
There's not just that. There's the hatch marks on the timers and things like this. There's so many tiny, weeny little differences as they were working out what was the most cost-effective way of producing these items. So in the first, say, 500 cameras, you're going to see quite a lot of differences. And the first 100 cameras now are considered grails. I know where probably about 10 of them reside.
There's a guy with a website. He actually photographs all of them by serial number.
Yes.
And he's got this site where it's just like mug shots, but they're all just Nikon Fs from 1959.
Yeah. I mean, I know probably where the earliest one I know of is in the 20s.
Wow. Okay.
I'm not allowed to say where that is.
Now, how much would something like that be worth?
Oh,
ballpark.
You can't put a price on it because they don't come for sale. I mean, I would hesitate, but wouldn't be surprised if it got $100,000.
Really?
Yeah, really.
That's interesting because if you have one... Let's listen to this clip. Ben Lowy and Marvi Lacar. First of all, that episode was great. We just tore up our scripts like 3 minutes into it because they were like bulls in China shop, and it was great. But the part that stays with me the most was...
just to clarify, they're a married couple.
Yes.
Documentarians and photojournalists, and they have kids together. So the episode was about not only their work, but their life together.
Yeah.
They do commercial stuff now,
Yeah,
too.
now they do commercial and advertising work.
They're collaborators and husband and wife and parents, and it's really interesting. But the part that got me the most was when Ben was talking about an agreement that they had that when they had, he was a war photographer, and once they had kids, they decided, maybe you should not be placing yourself in harm's way. And they had an agreement. And then he went back overseas to cover some warfare. I forget where he was. Libya. And he found himself in gunfire.
There was a day when in Libya, in Tripoli, in Gaddafi's compound, where I was in the most intense gun battle of my life. And I was on the third floor of a building, running up the stairs with Ron Haviv and Yuri Kozarov. And there were 3 soldiers in front of me. And they were clearing this building. And a sniper on the 5th floor shot straight down. And the man who was running in front of me, his head just exploded. And I kind of went backwards down the stairs, and I'm standing in the stairwell. And I remember standing there. I'm not shaking. I mean, it wasn't very good light. And I was just watching this blood. It was so red. Like the reddest you'd ever seen. And I was just mesmerized as I kind of flowed down the stairs. And Ron tapped me on the shoulder, and he's like, Ben, we're like the last guys in this. Like everyone just ran. So we started running out. We run down the stairs. And grenades started flying over our head as we left the building. Like literally, grenades flew over our heads as we went out of the door of this building and ran for cover. And more of that for like the next 2 hours of just nonstop. And I sat on those pictures for a while because I knew I'd broken a promise to Marvi that I wouldn't put myself into this kind of situation. I left Libya about a month later, and I went to Afghanistan, straight to Afghanistan, on assignment for the New York Times Magazine. And I was doing a story on like Afghans at leisure, like all the different sports Afghans play. It was a much more gentle, I guess would be the word, story. And I think I was frustrated that I had these intense images of war and I was sitting on it because in the midst of doing this non-intense story, I was thinking, and this maybe is a little bit of PTSD or the situation I found myself in where I was so at rest in Afghanistan on this quiet assignment that I looked back at the stuff in Libya. And so I transmitted it one night. And Marvi must have gotten Google alerts or something when those images hit Getty. And she called me. My New York cell phone still worked in Afghanistan. It's about $5.99 a minute on AT&T. And it was like 4 a.m. my time. And she let me have it for good 2 hours. It's a $4,000 phone bill. About how it's like I cheated on her, but with war, and I broke my promise, and she was going to leave me, and because I didn't really care about being a husband or a father. And it really, I sat in Afghanistan and listened to her and realized that it was time to make a choice about where my life was going and what I was doing and the reasons why I was doing it. And I really think of that phone call in all its brutal honesty from Marvi, and really one of the few times where, that I can count on my hand that our marriage was in serious trouble, that it was a watershed event for me about, how I was going to change and not do this in the same way anymore.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you, when you made that call, you're home, you have a newborn, was it a fear for him, a fear for your relationship, a fear for the children's and the future? Or was there also something we talked about earlier, this idea that he's over there doing this, and as dangerous and horrible it is, it's what he wants to do, and it's exciting, and you're here or back at home not doing it. Was there resentment also at that moment?
No. I mean, because I really did understand the motivation for going there. And as a matter of fact, I supported it because I knew that he emotionally needed to kind of, I suppose it was part of the healing process.
To complete the experience.
It was part of the process to go back to Libya and finish that story for him. So I understood that. I think what I didn't understand was the betrayal. And a lot of it too has to do with the fact that, one, he had all of these, like emotional, mental conflicts that he hadn't really dealt with after the death of the 2 photographers that we had known. So he hadn't, and I understood that. I understood that this was just a process that he needed to go to. I understood that. But what I really didn't get at that time, just now that I think about it, now looking back, he didn't have the same relationship with the kids that he has now. I mean, they were babies. They weren't talking. Caleb was just born. He was essentially just this blob, right? He can say that, yeah, that's my son and I'm the father and I love him. But, as with every human relationship, the more you get to know them, the deeper that relationship is. So there wasn't that type of bond yet. He loved his kids. That's a given. But he hadn't talked to them there. Their personalities weren't there yet. So I think that contributed to the ease of I guess, breaking that promise. And so I felt like it was a betrayal.
Because you had specifically spoken about this.
Right. Because, I again, and this was me, again, like seeing different scenarios. Like I saw Matteo as 5 and then Ben interacting with Matteo when he would be 5 and knowing that relationship. And for me, it was like, you were okay with the possibility of not having that bond with your child when they're older because you were willing to leave them when they were 1.5. And putting yourself in this situation that was very dangerous and could have been fatal. So that was to me what the betrayal was. Resentment didn't even I was in such a fog taking care of 2 kids under 2 that didn't even occur to me at that time. It was just
I
really.
gotta ask you a question though. Like, if you're going to places like Libya and Afghanistan at that time, isn't it sort of expected that the unexpected's going to happen anytime, any place?
Sure, I understand that, but you also realize that you can make logistical choices where you're not going after. Oh, you're not going to say, "Hey, there's the gunfire. I'm going to go run to that gunfire."
Let's see what all the noise is about.
I mean,
there were a couple of moments in my career before kids where I called Marvi. She didn't know, but I called her because I thought I was going to die. And I just wanted to say, hey, and goodbye. And
did you have that feeling when you were in this last situation, though, in that stairwell? Did that cross your mind? Did you go there saying, I'm cheating right now? Was that in your head at all, or are you just in the moment?
That was in the moment. There are situations when you're stuck in a conflict zone, but there's a period of rest where it's not intense, where you can reflect. There was a moment where I was stuck in Kirkuk after a suicide bombing, where I really thought I was gonna die, and I called Marvi, be like, "Oh hey, hon, I just wanted to say hey," before I was like smuggled out of town in the trunk of a car. And there were a couple of those moments in my career where I did make that choice that she didn't know. But and in that particular moment, no, there wasn't, because it was so intense. There was no moment to reflect. I think where it came from more is that I really defined myself for many years, for a decade, as a conflict photographer. This is what I do. This is where I shine, where I'm able to keep my head in the thick of it and think photographically and think contextually about what I'm seeing and how to show that to people. That was so important to me. I mean, my father was born in a concentration camp. And that really affected the way I grew up, the way he grew up. And from a very early age, I was really aware of the world and what it meant to have the privilege of that awareness and the burden. And when I became a photographer, it was very specifically to be a conflict photographer. I wasn't in love with the camera because it can make images, but I knew that I wanted to report from these spaces. And it's very hard for me to look back with the maturity that age brings and understand why that was, all the motivations behind why that was. But that, and that'll take years of reflection, like, why did I specifically want to just do this and nothing else? But that was how I defined myself. And I think it was very hard to strip that definition of being away to something else. And marriage wasn't enough to do that, but parenthood was.
That was just terrific. Last on my list, there's others here, but I'm just going to end here. Any show with Levi Tannenbaum. Okay,
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah.
Levi's been, I think, probably our most frequent guest here, and he knows his stuff. He speaks well. I learn things every time Levy's in our studio. I admire him. I love the guy dearly, and he's a terrific, terrific person to have here in the studio, and hope we'll have him more and more times.
And also, this gets back to the point about gear, because Levy's often on when we talk about gear, and he knows it inside and out, and he also brings some humor and practical sense to everything.
And he doesn't only know the specs; he understands the practical applications of those specs and what makes them so different. So that's off the top of my head, just going through the list. Those are the ones that I have just pretty much the past year, not even going into the first year.
Right. Yep. Okay. Well, let me mention two from late last year. I'll come back.
We're doing last year too?
No, we weren't. I just want to mention these two.
Didn't you get the memo?
I was only looking
I won't even go into it, but there's two that stand out in my mind when I think about what we've done in the past 2 years. And one of them was we did a show on crime scene unit photography. We had an ex-NYPD crime scene photographer who talked about the ins and outs of shooting crime scenes. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then when we went to Eddie Adams' workshop, we produced a few episodes, and one of them was with John White and India Beale, and that always sticks in my head. We called it To Serve and To Soar, and mostly, I mean, India was great, but John White's kind of a legend and just somebody who people love, and he was incredible.
Also, it was just a very high energy weekend there. The amount of buzz that was in the air was like insane.
Absolutely.
That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a short break and come back with more of the best of 2017.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, hashtag BHPhotoPodcast.
Okay, we are back. Jason, give us your hit list.
Okay. The first thing I have here is night photography from film to digital with Lance Keimig and Chris Nicholson. I'm interested in astrophotography, and that came at a good time for me because it was right before we went out to Joshua Tree National Park, and it was my first chance to actually do it.
Lance Keimig had some great insight, obviously, and Chris too, but Lance has been doing it so long and is kind of considered one of the experts, and he's got an encyclopedic knowledge of night photographers and techniques, and it was just a good episode.
Definitely, and I got to corner him after and really ask him some
I bet he loved that.
nerdy questions. Yeah.
Back in the film day, we were limited to 3 or 4 days a month around the full moon. Nobody would go out in the new moon and try to photograph. There just wasn't enough light outside of the urban areas to photograph at night with film. And these days, we go out into a national park under a full moon and there are no photographers. But if you go out under the new moon and you can't find a place to set up your tripod because everybody wants to photograph the Milky Way.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of my pet peeves is that today people associate night photography with photographing the Milky Way, and it's become commonplace to see that. We're all kind of used to that, but people have forgotten that we have ISOs other than 6400. It's true.
No, but I totally agree with you. I mean, when you see, you thumb through your Instagram and there's, a photograph of the Milky Way, twice a day from a different photographer, and it gets a little bit boring, and we talked about this before about, putting elements in the foreground and ways
the stars
to
are all the same. It's what you frame it with. That's the only difference between all the pictures, how you frame it, what you frame with. It's like, it's all there. Every night it's there. So what do you do with it then?
Just up in Cape Cod, Lance had this great idea where the Highland Lighthouse, beautiful lighthouse, and had the Milky Way going over, and Lance did a panorama, a stitched panorama of that, which is more complicated than it sounds. I mean, doing a stitch pano is, it's not a basic technique to begin with, but on top of it, you've got a lighthouse that's throwing out light in the middle of 20-second exposures, and just having to deal with that as an exposure issue, along with a stitch pano. It was pretty wild to see you tackle that.
Yeah, the light's coming around again. Cover the lens real quick. And
I was just going to ask you, did you just keep flipping your hand in front of the lens?
Yep,
right?
that's one technique. Chris actually did a great presentation on photographing lighthouses and different techniques where you could do it either at twilight when the light for the lighthouse and the ambient light is balanced,
right?
But that's not really night photography. Or you can do a manual blending of an exposure for the light and another one for everything else, or HDR where you have use software to do layer blending. Combining the dynamic range of a bright light source like a lighthouse with a starlit landscape, and then trying to combine that with a half a dozen shots with the Milky Way rising over top of it is.
How'd it turn out?
Awesome.
Actually, a former student of mine posted an image, stitched panorama of that same lighthouse that she did, and I was asking her about it because it was stunning, better than what I did, and she said that it took her 3 years to get the shot. And that that's why I'm not worried about people sticking their phone out the airplane window and shooting the Milky Way, because those people are not going to spend 3 years trying to get one shot. And, she said that it was, the photograph that she's most proud of, and deservedly so.
And I think that points to an important concept that, the technology is getting better and there's things that are easy now that were hard before, but the good photographers tend to be the ones who are pushing the limits of the gear. And this better gear just means that there's new limits to explore and there's new photo opportunities that we haven't thought of yet because they weren't possible yesterday. So even though the gear is better, more people are using it, and there's more people who think of themselves as photographers. The leaders are always going to be the leaders and finding something new to do. And it's a good thing. It's how the industry goes forward. It's why we do images today that we couldn't do yesterday. And it's why there's going to be images tomorrow that we can't do today.
Yeah, spot on, Chris.
Good job.
So there was that. What else do we have here? I really liked the first episode we did of the year, the post-processing with Katrina Eisman and Peter Crow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Katrina knows. She's a great guest, and boy, does she know her stuff.
She does.
Yeah.
And she's funny.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yeah, and he knew his stuff.
Well, Peter, of course. I mean, he's, top of the list in terms of, digital asset management, and he's got a new book out about preserving family memories and how to keep those photos alive. It was good talk.
And we had that question and answer session, and I thought that was pretty informative. That answered some stuff for me that I was wondering.
Right.
And then the landscape ethics episode, two photographers that I love, Ryan Dyar and Adam Burton.
Oh yeah,
and that was early in the year. I think that was our second or third episode of the year.
Mm-hmm. We actually combined two ideas to make that episode, and I think it was great because I wanted to do something on this idea of ethics of landscape photography when it comes to, how much post-production work can you do? Are you really documenting a landscape, or are you creating something else?
Are you illustrating a landscape?
Yeah, where do you draw the line? Not to mention the idea of ethics of how you impose yourself onto a scene and onto nature. And of course, and Jason's a big fan of Ryan Dyar and Adam Burton, and he brought them to our attention. And we were able to kind of talk about their work, which is incredible, and also bring up the subject of how much post-production is too much and where do you cross the line. And they both had different takes on it. It was a really interesting talk.
And I thought it was cool how they both are pretty out front with how they approach it.
Yeah.
I think Ryan would say that Photoshop is an instrument for him as well. Adam Burton doesn't approach it that way.
Right.
For him, the picture's the picture. He does it all with filters. It has to be captured in camera. There's no blending. There's no...
Right, but both of their points, I think, were that it's all okay as long as you're open and upfront about how you're doing
exactly.
it.
That's really all I had. Oh, I have this. This one makes my top 5 list of John's most puzzling podcast titles. Learn Travel Photography Best was the title of the show.
Yeah, that's true.
That sounded like the name of a light modifier from Profoto, the way they have, the transliterated from Swedish.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Exactly. But it was a great episode. Eric Kraszewski was on it. I can't believe I said that right.
Yeah.
Don't try it again. You did it perfectly.
Yeah.
His whole story was interesting.
The
He's
guy
a
was
fascinating
an engineer, decided he wanted to start taking pictures all of a sudden. Now he's this like Nat Geo / documentarian.
Let me just jump back here to defend myself here. No, but some of the titles I know are a stretch, but in the case of this and others, I pulled them right from the episode. And in this case, Eric, when he started his career, he literally put into Google, learn travel photography, best.
Right.
And he went from there to a tutorial, and that's how he started his career. So I thought, well, we'll just start with that.
So
there's always a logic to it.
What started as a drunk scrawl has become just,
Yeah.
It was a typo.
It's like a riddle. It's like when someone explains it to you, like, oh, okay.
Yeah. If you listen to the show carefully, you'll find it there.
And then the hip hop episode hit home for me. That was great.
Yeah, that was your Bellamy hunt moment.
That was my
I was Japan camera. You were hip hop. It's like you just went away on that episode.
Yeah, I grew up with that music, so it was.
You were a kid in a candy store.
It was great, and it was awesome to talk to these guys that like shot these album covers that I grew up with, and
we got really lucky on that episode. And of course, it's thanks to Vicky Tobak and the Contact High project that she's working on. She brought these photographers together, but we had 3, out and out legends of that type of photography. Album covers and publicity shots and magazine work from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
And they each had an interesting voice and interesting stories.
Absolutely.
They were very good guests.
Yeah.
That's which was equally important.
One thing I mentioned to Jason after the fact was that we had one came from the dance and club music scene. One's influence was the rock and roll, the Pink Floyd type of music, and the other one came out of the punk movement, which seems to be kind of a perfect three-way entry into the hip hop world. You know?
Definitely.
Yeah. It was good, and we'll play a clip now from Danny Hastings.
When I got the phone call to shoot the Wu-Tang Clan, I already did like a couple of album covers. I already had Return of the Boom Bap with Carries One, and I had RCA as a client already. And I got the phone call, and I was in Atlanta, right? I learned pretty quickly that you had to network to get business. You know, I didn't have a job. I didn't have 9 to 5. This was my career kind of happening. So I heard that there was a hip hop conference in Atlanta. So I'm like, man, I'm going there. I'm going to get some clients. So while I was there, I got the phone call from RCA. And the art director's name is Jackie Murphy, super good friend of mine. And she was like, hey, man, you're going to shoot this group. It's called the Wu-Tang Clan. I already heard one song, Protect Your Neck, and Method Man. I was like, oh, man, this is awesome. But I never seen them. And coincidentally, they were performing in a new showcase group in that conference that I was. I was like, oh, the Wu-Tang is going to be here, so let me go and check them out. So, I go with all my boys, I mean, it's the 90s, so you always rock with, the boys everywhere, It's like, let's go and check it out. So we're I'm on stage, like I was like kind of like on stage and just checking the group out or whatever. This group that it was going on is like new music. And all of a sudden, this dude with a mask shows up on stage, and the rap group that is performing, they're looking at this guy like, who is this? Like, and this guy has a hoodie and a stocking mask, right? Just kind of like grilling at the group, and and then all of a sudden another guy with a mask comes in, and, in the stage, and then now the rappers are like, what's going on, right? And all of a sudden, like 8 dudes bomb rush the stage with stocking masks and hoodies and just take the dudes out the stage. Pandemonium happens. They take the DJ out. They kick the sound man. And all of a sudden, Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with. And the place went bananas. Wow. Right. I've been telling this story for the last 20 years. Right?
I get goosebumps whenever I hear that story.
And I got an interview with remezcla.com, and they found the video, and I'm on stage.
Oh, that's great.
Like, I never seen that. I never seen that. Like, they found the tape of it's called Jack the Rapper, Wu-Tang performance, and I'm on stage, like, looking like 20 years old. Like, it's just, I'm like, oh my God, that's me right there. That's what I've been saying, right?
There's proof.
So, yeah, man. So fast forward into the photo shoot. I never heard anything like it. Now I'm listening to the whole album, the entire production. I was in the dungeon, man. Like Raekwon and Method Man rapped in my ears. I was like, oh my God, they're spitting in my face. Like, this is crazy. I never heard this.
So you were closely intertwined there to really capture what they were going for.
Yeah, but and mind you, I never worked with a camera. Like I never been a journalist. I was always an artist creating. I was more of a cinematographer, photographer. Yeah. So I was. Well,
those covers are not, documentary. Those are composed.
Yes, they're very composed. Yeah. So I was listening. I was inside their studio, listening to these beats and these bells and these Asian sounds and these kung fu flicks. And he was like, I want this to look like Enter the Dragon.
Into the Dragon, right.
Enter the Dragon, like Bruce Lee. So I was like, wow, man, so I can get candles and I can get, all this stuff and I can carve the Wu-Tang logo. Like, he only had a cassette with the Wu-Tang logo. So I was like, let's make that big and let's make like a shrine. And it was a collaborative idea. And, because I came from like a very visual stimulating sort of background, I wanted to do that for hip hop. The day of the shoot, however, that shoot almost got canceled because were here, and there was only like 5 members in the Wu-Tang, and he was like, "Oh man, you know, all the boys are not here, so we're not gonna do this." I was like, "Wait, why don't we do what you did in Atlanta?" So he was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Put a stocking mask on and just come like you bum rush that stage." If I was not in Atlanta at that point in my life, that cover wouldn't have happened. So yes, I was part of the culture, and I also was, you know, doing something different, and I got the chance. I mean, and he was like, "All right, you mean like not show our faces?" I was like, "Yeah, you're the Wu-Tang Clan. It's the clan. It's not." And he went with it, and the Rizzo went with it. It's like, "All right, let's do it," and we did history.
Wow,
right there.
That's a great
that,
story.
That album sort of, it's one of, I think, Rolling Stone's 25th most influential albums.
Oh yeah, I mean,
of all times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I think isn't it like a Wu secret as to who is actually
the photo?
like
Oh, yeah,
what
Yeah.
So obviously,
Yeah.
Rizzo,
if indeed it is any of them at all.
No, yeah, there's 5 of them.
yeah, because you don't. Yeah, it's well, obviously Rizzo was there.
Rizzo was there, All Dirty was there, Inspector Deck, Ghost, Raekwon, and did I say All Dirty?
You did, yeah.
And the Jizza. It was 6 of them. Yeah.
Okay.
It was
So you-
6 of them.
No, you got.
That's a crazy
No,
story.
you got no Method Man.
No meth.
No,
Thanks for that
no
story,
Master
bro.
Killer.
Thanks for that story.
That's crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah, so it was.
Really
It was
well.
always like I'm always like
Wow.
a problem solver. Like I never let an opportunity go. Like I know we gotta do this, and brain start going in, and all of a sudden, he was like, "Yeah, let's do it."
All right, so I'll jump in now.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, all right. I already mentioned the couple from 2016, but I had ethics of landscape photography, as Jason mentioned, and I had hip hop photography. I thought that hip hop show was incredible, just the back and forth between the 3 photographers and the stories they told. They were so open. It was wonderful. I also had Irving Penn on my list because the fact that we pulled people from our staff and we had all these different viewpoints, I thought that was great. I also had Richard Drew. That was just a powerful episode on a very powerful topic.
By the way,
And-
it's also interesting to mention, and I didn't even get this when the show first started, is that he was also present at the assassination of Robert Kennedy.
Exactly. That was
This
crazy.
man is a witness to a lot of
yeah.
heavy-duty dates.
You don't need
yeah.
to be a photographer to appreciate that episode.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And that was an episode that was over a year in the making in some ways. And I'm just, it's a touchy subject. So
Yeah.
the fact that we were able to put it together, I'm really happy.
Move over Radio Lab.
Yeah.
We took a year. We took a year to make an episode.
Exactly. Which also leads me to another one that we haven't mentioned yet, which we called Taking the Long View, Social Documentary Projects. And we had 2 photographers, Salwin George and Griselda San Martin. Salwin was a refugee from Iraq who, as a teenager, came to the United States and started building a career. At the time, he was working for the Detroit Free Press, and now he's working for the Washington Post. And it was about his look at the Middle East community in Detroit. And we also talked to Griselda, who did a project on the wall that is currently in San Diego, and how immigrants and people who've been deported cannot cross over, and how people interact through the wall. I thought that was kind of an interesting subject, and it was a good show. We did one on in-game photography, which are gamers who take images of the in-game environment that while they're playing it, video games are talking about. That was kind of interesting. We had someone who just kind of explores the worlds and takes photos of interesting corners, and then we had an artist who uses these to kind of create his art with. We had one that we did in Spanish, or part of it was in Spanish, with Pepe Castro. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I still don't know what that one was about.
Right. It was about his work. That was, we did about a 10-minute segment just in Spanish only. I think one of the all-around best episodes we did was called When Was the Last Time You Touched a Photograph? And it was about printing and papers. And, the topic was pretty gear related, but also technique. But I just thought the guests were good, the conversation was good, and it was a really tight episode. I like that one.
That inspired me to go out and print photos
Yeah. So another episode I liked was we called it Multicultural and Destination Wedding Photography, and it was with Jide Alakija, who is a Nigerian-born, raised in England, I believe, now based in Brooklyn, photographer who shoots all over the world. He's in demand, but he spoke of some of the weddings he shot in Nigeria and the traditions there. He said at some point they have like 100 photographers at a wedding, because guests will give as a present a photographer to document the wedding. So he's there working with 99 other photographers around him at a wedding. Thought that was a pretty interesting episode.
And he had a really interesting, like, documentarian style of like work.
Oh, his photography is just beautiful.
Yeah,
He really has a special touch.
By the way, on the topic of wedding photography, we did a show on underwater wedding photography, which is the most bizarre thing I've heard. And it was great.
Yeah.
Some of the imagery, and it's like, people are actually going underwater to take wedding photography.
The next one I was going to mention, and not for the wedding photographer, but for the portrait photographer, Jenna Martin, who is based out in Montana.
That's right.
Of all places.
Of all places, yes.
But she shoots underwater portrait and art photography and to some degree fashion. But what I really liked about her was her total do-it-yourself. I mean, she built her own underwater housing.
Yeah.
She came in it from another career. I think she was a psychologist, and she decided to get into photography.
She should have her head examined. She really should.
And she built everything from the ground up. And she shoots underwater without tanks. She just goes down, holds her breath, and shoots. Yeah, I mean, I really
don't try this
really
at home,
liked
kids.
Really liked her attitude and her style, and her photos are beautiful. We had an episode with Allison Wright called "Can a Photographer Make a Difference?" and her story is incredible. You know, she had a near-death accident, and it only informs the compassion of her photography. And I know she has a new book out, and people should take a look for that. My last one on the list is really a series of episodes that we did, and we called it Dispatch with Adriane Ohanesian. And if you look, you'll see that we have 6 different segments, and she will send us, I guess we'll call it an audio diary of her work. She's a freelance photographer working in Africa, and she covers conflict and, you know, some very, very hard-hitting issues. And once a month, we profiled what she was up to, basically. And in episode number 5, so I would suggest you look to that, and we'll play a clip. She was working in the Congo on a story about illegal poaching and illegal mining, and her party with park rangers came under attack, and 5 people were killed. And she barely escaped and was forced to spend 24 hours in a hole in the ground hiding from the attackers. She came down with malaria. She was without shoes. She lost all of her equipment. It's one of these stories that is just, you know, you can't really understand it even as she relates it. But where is she now? Right back what she was doing. I mean, it just shows
that's
the passion.
Her home. She's very clear about that. That's her home.
And the passion and the strength and the commitment that it goes to covering these stories was clearly on display in that episode.
Just before 4 in the afternoon, because we planned to leave at 4, and we hadn't eaten yet, so I was getting a bit antsy because I didn't want to miss the nice afternoon light. So I was actually bent over the fire, and I had removed my cameras. I had flip-flops on, just walking around the camp, relaxing, and I heard gunshots. And I didn't just hear gunshots, they were right in front of me. And my 2 colleagues had been a few steps away, and I immediately saw them start to run, and everyone in the camp started to run. I also turned and ran, and the gunshots were quite close. The shooters were quite close. By the time I ran to the edge of the hill and turned around just to make sure, I'm thinking back on it now, I should have just kept running, but I had this thought of I need to look behind me and make sure that my colleagues are safe. I looked on the ground because I had assumed if anyone had been shot, that's where they would be. Looked on the ground, no one was on the ground behind me, and turned around again to run and looked over to my right and could see the attackers already in the camp, and just ran. And I saw some of the rangers in front of me running some people were throwing themselves down the side of the small hill. But I didn't know the area as well as a lot of these other people, so my first reaction was just to get somewhere safe away from the gunfire. I was trying to figure out, maybe I was thinking too much of what the best strategy would be to get myself safe. And so I found, I guess it might have been about halfway down this little hill that we were on, I saw a couple of deep holes, and I thought, well, I can go down there and get cover from the gunfire. And I looked in one and didn't look quite deep enough, and I saw another that was quite deep, and I was scared to jump down because I might hurt myself. And so I found kind of a medium-sized hole. And of course, this is all happening very quickly. It sounds like a bit of a Goldilocks story. So I jumped in this medium-sized hole, and by then there had been returned gunfire from the Rangers. So again, I was at this point kind of in crossfire, and I was just thinking I need to get below ground as soon as possible just to get away from the fire. So I stayed crouched, not even crouched, lying on my left side in this hole until the sun came up the next morning. And I was so relieved to see kind of the background behind the leaves above my head begin to lighten. And at this point, I was thinking, okay, maybe the people who have taken over this camp have left. I was just hoping that they were there to rob and that they would take the belongings that were still in the camp and leave. But I could hear people in the camp the next morning, and that really frightened me because the only thing I could think of was that they were here to stay. They were here to reclaim territory. They were here to take over this gold mine again, which they had lost. And so, again, I was just thinking, okay, what are the options here? And I was listening to the people in the camp, and I could hear them walking around and could hear them digging through pieces of the tents, and they would throw things down off of the hill that they didn't need or didn't want, or maybe they were just bored. I don't know. I think one of them took a bath quite near where I was hiding. And by bath, I mean just buckets, like a bucket shower, just dumping buckets of water. So some of the water was even falling into the hole I was hiding in. I was quite close. At that point, I started to convince myself that they knew I was there, and they were just kind of, I don't know, torturing me a bit by, throwing water into the hole or throwing items from the camp down around where I was hidden. I heard them eat a pack of cookies that I had brought, that I had specifically bought a couple days before in one of the towns. And I could hear the crinkling of this packet, and then I could kind of hear them finishing the cookies. And then everything went silent.
We've had tremendous support from the management at B&H Photo. They get what we're doing. They give us the space to do what we're doing. And as I said early on in the show, minimal interference, and I can't think of any time when we were told what we have to do here. That's a gift. That's really something we don't take for granted. Nor do we take for granted the fact that all you folks out there listen to us, tune in, sign up for the show, and give us feedback. And it's again, that's part of it, because three of us sitting here talking in the room just is not as much fun as hearing back from all of you out there what you think, your thoughts on the shows, and even ideas for future shows. We're open to all that stuff.
Yeah,
it
definitely.
all works. It all works.
Yeah, any comments.
Mhm.
We like them. Yeah.
And on that note, on behalf of Jason, John, and myself, Happy New Year, happy holidays, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in today.